Um, uh, Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at glycolysis. And glycolysis, we said earlier on that it is the first stage of respiration. So as respiration takes place, food is broken down to release energy. Glycolysis makes the first stage for that food to be broken down. Which food is that? So we look at a 6-carbon molecule, that is glucose, being broken down to release energy. But this 6-carbon molecule, it always arises from the major carbohydrates that we do take. For example, the polysaccharides. For example, starch. Starch is a polysaccharide which has no taste, of which once it is digested by our digestive system, then further splitting of the 6-carbon molecule during respiration produces the energy. So the energy will not be produced by just mere digestion of food. Digestion of food requires energy. But now, the real respiration, you're going to have that 6-carbon molecule being broken down so that energy can be released. So when is it broken down? It is broken down to produce a 3-carbon molecule. Of course, there won't be two of them, pyruvate acid, under anaerobic conditions, and the formation of lactic acid under anaerobic conditions. So we are going to see later on that glycolysis can take place even without oxygen, and we're going to see why. So glycolysis occurs mainly in the cytoplasm of eukaryotic cells. Remember, eukaryotic cells are cells which have membrane-bound organelles. For example, mitochondria, nucleus, and among others. So, what should we note about glycolysis? Glycolysis is the first stage of respiration. That is what you should also know. That glycolysis, if you look at the stages of respiration, it is the first stage. Secondly, glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm, as we have earlier on mentioned. It occurs in the cytoplasm. So the site of glycolysis is mainly the cytoplasm. So glycolysis is purely an anaerobic process. It doesn't require oxygen. So glycolysis, if you are, as we're going to look at in our next lesson, we shall find out that in all the reactions we shall be involving, we shall not see any oxygen getting involved. So it means that glycolysis can easily occur even without oxygen. So, but later, before we said that anaerobic conditions can happen and anaerobic conditions can happen, but when does oxygen get involved in glycolysis? Because it will not be directly involved at this stage. That's why when we are going to look at the sequence of glycolysis, the stages of glycolysis, we shall not see an oxygen molecule entering in. But when will it come in? So it will come in only in an indirect way. It will come in an indirect way, especially in the regeneration of NAD, the oxidized NAD. This NAD is oxidized. It is having NAD positive. So for glycolysis to easily continue, this NAD which is oxidized must be available. So oxygen oxidizes the other NAD H which is reduced, which is having NAD with this NAD. So this is reduced NAD. A NAD with hydrogen is reduced, and the NAD with the plus is mainly oxidized. So this NAD that we are talking about here, it is oxidized. So it is reduced, but we need oxidized NAD for glycolysis to purely take place. So oxygen helps in oxidizing this reduced NAD to NADH, but that process does not occur directly when glycolysis is taking place. So it occurs indirectly when this NAD gets introduced in. But for getting introduced in this oxidized NAD, it is oxidized by the oxidation occurs by the oxygen. So when is it going to be anaerobic? Of course, anaerobic, we know there is always fermentation, there is always production of lactic acid. Lactic acid is produced mainly in animals, but now fermentation of alcohol can occur in plants. So when does glycolysis occur in absence of oxygen? So the biggest problem is this reduced NAD. This reduced NAD in under anaerobic conditions, it will actually donate its electrons, because we know very well that oxidation is the loss of electrons. It can be the removal of hydrogen, so hydrogen is removed, and then we remain with NAD without hydrogen. So this hydrogen or electrons can be donated to that organic compound formed due to fermentation of the glucose molecule. So that we can again obtain back our oxidized NAD. So in under anaerobic conditions, this NAD which is having H, and we are calling it reduced NAD, it donates its electrons to that organic molecule formed during the anaerobic conditions, so that it can facilitate the formation of NAD which is oxidized, so that glycolysis can easily take place. It implies that glycolysis, whether oxygen is available, whether it is not available, still glycolysis can occur there. So we have seen two cases whereby under anaerobic conditions, when does glycolysis happen? Under anaerobic conditions, we have realized that under anaerobic conditions, this reduced NAD, it will donate its electrons to that organic molecule we shall say later on, which is formed as a result of the fermentation. And then when conditions are aerobic, yes, it will be an advantage still, whereby this oxygen which is produced is going to oxidize this reduced NAD to form the oxidized NAD. I guess we are together. So under normal circumstances, glycolysis, whether oxygen is available or not, glycolysis will still continue. It will not stop. It will not stop because the two stages of anaerobic and aerobic, under normal circumstances, this NAD which is going to be very essential in glycolysis, this reduced NAD is going to be always oxidized. It's always going to be oxidized under very many circumstances. It will be oxidized. We have said in absence of oxygen, the organic molecule formed by formed during the fermentation stage, and then in presence of oxygen, of course, in oxygen, when oxygen can it can combine with this hydrogen can combine with oxygen, so that we can remain with an oxidized NAD in that way. So that is all about the introduction to glycolysis. In our second lesson, we are going to have the major stages of glycolysis, and we are going to see what is the energy yield, what is the net yield of ATP, how many ATP molecules does glycolysis produce. Of course, after glycolysis, we shall go to the next stage, and that is Krebs cycle. Thank you for watching.